211 Resumption of diplomatic relations. Madam Sun was speechless. At that time, after Lai Tong finished speaking, he looked at Sun Guo with sympathy. Her first reaction was that Wen Qin and Mr. Wei had an affair. At the thought that Wen Qin might have cheated on her, she rushed home angrily. Madam Sun knew very well that she couldn't let Wen Qin leave the Sun family. Otherwise, she and her son would have to do those chores, especially the heavy work in the field. If her son couldn't do it, without Wen Qin's help, her work points wouldn't be enough to exchange for food. At the thought that Wen Qin ran away with someone and that there was no one left for her to order around, Madam Sun panicked. Hence, she made a prompt decision and asked Sun Guo to tie her up at home. It wasn't easy for Wen Qin to get such a good opportunity. She couldn't bring herself to give up, so for the first time, she put on a tough front with Madam Sunday. Hence, Madam Sun starved Wen Qin today to force Wen Qin to compromise as soon as possible. Seeing this, Yu Bing sneered and gave Mr. Wei and Zhao Lin a look, asking them to stop Sun Guo. Then, she quickly went forward and rolled up Wen Qin's long sleeve. As expected, there was a large bruise on her arm. This scene made Yu Bing clench her fists. She immediately began to untie the hemp rope. Village Chief, Wen Qin is an employee of our food factory. Now that she has been mistreated like this, she can't work normally. As the factory director, I have to figure out the situation. After all, it wasn't easy for us to spend so much time and effort to nurture an accountant. When Madam Sun saw that her son was being stopped, she could only go forward and stop them. The village chief felt embarrassed in front of the villagers, so he scolded angrily, Madam Sun, Sun Guo, how can you guys hit someone? When Madam Sun saw the village chief's angry expression, she hurriedly explained, this B*TCH was fooling around outside. If we don't teach her a lesson, it'll be too late if she really sleeps with another man. After Yu Bing helped Wen Qin up, she said sternly, you said that Wen Qin was fooling around, but that's just your groundless accusation. But now, there's conclusive evidence of illegal imprisonment and domestic violence. As a woman, Zhao Lin empathized with her and couldn't help but speak up for her. Wen Qin is pregnant with your family's child. How can you be so ruthless? When Madam Sun heard the word evidence, she panicked and shouted, what imprisonment? I don't understand what you're talking about. She's my daughter-in-law. If I tell her to stay at home, she has to stay at home. Which couple doesn't fight? Moreover, I only hit her hand. Her body isn't injured, and the child in her stomach is fine. Madam Sun deemed it their family's internal strife. At this moment, as long as no one died, it was really difficult for the police to intervene in the fight between husband and wife unless the victim pursued legal action. Yu Bing looked at Wen Qin encouragingly, in hopes that she would stand up for herself bravely. When Wen Qin glanced at Yu Bing, her originally lifeless eyes lit up and she opened her mouth slightly. Madam Sun had been staring at Wen Qin's reaction. When she saw that Wen Qin seemed to want to speak, she suddenly coughed. When Wen Qin turned around and saw the warning in Madam Sun's eyes, her eyes dimmed again. Miss Yu, I'm sorry. I can't go back to work. Madam Sun revealed a smug smile and looked at Yu Bing provocatively. My daughter-in-law doesn't want to go, so don't interfere in my family's matters. Get lost. Zhao Lin and Mr. Wei couldn't help but frown at Wen Qin. They didn't understand Wen Qin's choice. If it was a fight between husband and wife, it was understandable that she didn't want to cause trouble at the police station and wanted to settle it in private, but she had such a good job in the factory. Even with the factory director around, she didn't try hard to fight for the opportunity and gave up directly. They really couldn't understand. They only felt that the Wen Qin they saw here was completely different from the outgoing Wen Qin they usually interacted with. Yu Bing had observed the changes in Wen Qin and saw that she changed her mind after she glanced at Madam Sunday. When she thought of her previous guess, she decided to give it a try. She pretended to be nonchalant as she said, Wen Qin, when you make a decision, don't let others affect you. The previous dynasty has been dead for many years. A few years ago, we resumed diplomatic relations with America. This era is really different from the past. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 212 Report. We women have to learn to be independent and fight for our legal rights. The country protects the vulnerable. Wen Qin suddenly grabbed Yu Bing's hand and stared at her as she asked in shock, What did you just say? We resumed diplomatic relations with America? Yu Bing felt her hand hurt from being grabbed, but she was even more certain of the rumor she had heard in her previous life. She looked straight at Wen Qin and replied firmly, Yes, it happened 3 to 4 years ago. Our relationship is very good now. Wen Qin suddenly laughed out loud. The more she laughed, the louder she became. Gradually, her laughter turned into wailing, as if she wanted to cry out all the grievances of her life. Everyone present was stunned. Worried, Sun Gua wanted to go forward, but he didn't dare to. He looked at Madam Sun timidly. Madam Sun felt a little scared and wondered if she had driven Wen Qin crazy. After a while, Wen Qin wiped her tears and stood in front of the village chief as she said firmly, "Village chief, I want to make a report. I want to report my mother-in-law for domestic violence and corruption." Domestic violence and corruption were two mainstream terms of taboo conduct. Madam Sun had never thought that Wen Qin would dare to point the blame at her. She glared at her and picked up the tobacco pipe hanging from her belt to hit her. The current Wen Qin was no longer afraid. She used all her strength to grab Madam Sun's hand. Wen Qin did manual labor all year round. Although she was very thin, she was still very strong, so Madam Sun couldn't pull her hand out. Knowing that Wen Qin was about to fall out with her, she shouted at her son, "Sun Gua, take out that letter and give it to the village chief." When Sun Gua heard this, he hurriedly shook his head and begged his mother, "Mom, you can't take it. Wen Qin will be doomed." When Madam Sun saw her son's expression, she was furious and shouted, "If you don't bring it here, she'll ruin my life. Hurry up." Sun Gua didn't dare to disobey his mother, so he could only enter the room to get the letter. Madam Sun looked at Wen Qin proudly. As long as this letter of treason was released, who would have the time to care about her minor crimes? Soon, the letter was in the village chief's hand. Yu Bing immediately went forward. It was an English letter. The village chief frowned. How could he understand a foreign language? Yu Bing reminded him, "Village chief, this is in English. It says the campus situation of Wen Qin's sister, who went to study in America. You can also look for the intellectuals in your village to help translate." Communication with foreign countries was a big deal. The village chief thought about it and remembered that Yu Bing wasn't from the village after all, so he called someone over at the door to call an intellectual who knew English over to confirm the contents of the letter. After the three young people who knew English came, they translated the entire letter and confirmed that it was an ordinary letter. Although there was no news in the countryside, the village chief went to a meeting every month. He knew that their country and America had resumed diplomatic relations with each other. Hence, he quickly made up his mind about the letter. Our two countries are on friendly terms now. Moreover, this is an ordinary letter. There's no treason involved whatsoever. When Wen Qin heard this, she finally relaxed and a tear streaked across the corner of her eye. When she came to the countryside back then, she happened to meet the mailman who had delivered the letter her sister had sent her, so she stuffed it into her bag and brought it to the countryside. At that time, the village had not prepared a dormitory for the intellectuals, so she was arranged to stay in the Sun family's house. Madam Sun had sticky fingers. When she wasn't around, Madam Sun rummaged through her bag and saw this foreign letter. Then, she used it to threaten her into marrying Sun Gua. Back then, the relationship between the two countries was very tense and the law wasn't as lax as it was now. Those people wouldn't care about the content at all and wouldn't even give them a chance to refute. Anyone who received a foreign letter might be directly deemed as a traitor for betraying the country and colluding with the enemy. In order not to implicate her elderly parents in the city, she could only choose to compromise. There was no external information channel in the countryside. Wen Qin didn't expect the relationship between the two countries to have changed long ago, so she had been enduring it silently. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 213 Freedom. After enduring for so many years, Wen Qin had already lost hope for her future life. This time, she wanted to obtain an accounting position only to save money to send her son to school, but she didn't expect such a big surprise. However, this news wasn't good for Madam Sunday. For so many years, she had relied on this letter to control Wen Qin. If it was useless, how could Wen Qin listen to her orders in the future? This is treason. Do you guys plan to protect this bitch? She was just short of saying that the village chief was covering up for her. How could the village chief tolerate this? Madam Sun, don't be unreasonable. A few people have already read and confirmed the contents of the letter. Moreover, our two countries are now on friendly terms. Don't ruin the harmonious relationship between our two countries. Yu Bing smiled coldly and reminded her, Madam Sun, you should be glad that this isn't a letter of treason. Otherwise, if you didn't report it, you would be the one most guilty of cover-up. It would be no different from treason. Madam Sun immediately came back to her senses. Her mouth moved, but she didn't dare to speak again. Madam Sun didn't dare to cause trouble anymore, but Wen Qin wouldn't forget the evil things Madam Sun had done to her. Village Chief, there's a book called Women's Virtue in my mother-in-law's room. Every time she's in a bad mood, she forces me to kneel in front of her bed and read it. In the summer, she forces me to fan her face and massage her legs all night. If anything went wrong, she would scald me with her pipe. After Wen Qin finished speaking, she rolled up her pants and they saw that her calf was covered in burns. There were new and old scars stacked on top of each other. Everyone was terrified by the sight. When Madame Zhou saw this scene, she couldn't help but walk forward angrily. What did you promise me back then? You're so unrepentant. The village chief didn't expect someone to use such torture methods under his rule. This was no different from those landlords who oppressed the poor and treated the people at the bottom inhumanely. Sun Ing, you're well versed in the ways of those landlords who exploit and oppress others. I originally thought that you were sold to be a concubine of an old landlord and a victim of feudal society, but now, I think what you said back then was all a lie. After Madame Sun's evil deeds had been exposed, she was so flustered that her legs went weak. She braced herself and continued to quibble, I'm the victim. When Qin was in the wrong, so I taught her a lesson. Madame Zhou didn't intend to hide it anymore. Sun Ing, seems like you really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. I shouldn't have helped you hide it back then. Village chief, when Sun Ing was a concubine in the past, she had a maidservant. You know that I used to be a helper in that landlord's family. I saw Sun Ing whip that little maidservant a few times. Later, after the new regime was established, the servants of the landlord's family disbanded. Not long after that servant returned home, she died of illness. I hesitated about whether or not to reveal it. Sun Ing found me and said that she punished the servant because she had done something wrong. She also promised me that she wouldn't use those torturous methods on anyone else in the future. I pitied her for having a blind son, so I didn't reveal it. I didn't expect Sun Ing to be so vicious. We all know Wen Qin's character. We also know how much she has contributed to the Sun family. Other than working, she usually stays at home. It's only recently that she applied for an accounting position. With that, Madame Zhou looked at Madame Sun mockingly and said, you have to find a more credible excuse. Just like that, Madame Sun's background was exposed. The village chief had to deal with this matter seriously, so he said, Madame Sun, you have to accept everyone's criticism and change your feudal mindset. In the future, you have to go to the weekly criticism meeting to reflect on yourself. Madame Sun knew that there was nothing she could do about this, so she sat on the ground with a defeated expression. In the past, she was the one who took the lead in criticizing others. Those were her most glorious moments. Even if there was nothing wrong with those people, she could fabricate a problem and slander them. Only when Madame Sun saw those people begging for mercy in front of her would she feel the pleasure of power. As when Qin looked at Madame Sun, who had been defeated, she knew that she was truly free now. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 214 Guilt. At this moment, Sun Guo also realized that from this moment on, the woman he had been suppressing would no longer be under his control. His mother would also be condemned because of her. Sun Guo lowered his head to hide the ruthlessness in his eyes as he looked at Wen Qin. After Lai Tong heard all of this, he also understood the reason behind Wen Qin's decision back then. He felt mixed emotions. After the village chief settled the matter, he left the Sun family's home. At this moment, only the Sun family and Yu Bing were left in the small courtyard. Wen Qin bowed to Yu Bing and the others. Thank you for not giving up on me. Yu Bing, thank you for telling me this. Otherwise, I might not have been able to escape this cage for the rest of my life. Yu Bing smiled nonchalantly. I just said whatever came to my mind. I didn't expect to be able to help you. Remember to go to work on time tomorrow. After Wen Qin's matter was resolved, Yu Bing didn't stay any longer. The few of them returned to Yi Mountain Village together. At night, Xiaoxing and Yu Bing discussed the supply of goods in City Z under the tree at the door. Xiaoxing teased Yu Bing, you're so busy that it has not been easy to see you recently. Yu Bing thought of their private collaboration. It had been a long time since she had produced a new product, so she smiled in embarrassment. I've been a little busy recently. When I'm done, I'll try to come up with a new product. Xiaoxing knew that Yu Bing had misunderstood him and hurriedly said, I have no intention of rushing you. I just want to discuss with you if we should temporarily suspend our private dealings. I've set up a transport team over there, and the industries you manage are expanding. So we might as well focus on buying goods from the factory in the future. We'll distribute whatever goods there are in the factory. This way, we won't be so tired. It's just that Jiang Chun. Yu Bing also agreed with Xiaoxing's idea, but she and Xiaoxing still had another collaboration. After this collaboration was cancelled, Jiang Chun would be the most affected. Jiang Chun's source of external income would be cut off, but she and Xiaoxing really didn't have time to manage this collaboration. Yu Bing quickly made a decision. Our hands are tied and we really don't have time. I'll tell Jiang Chun. I'll think of other ways for her to earn money. By the way, why did you think of taking the transportation route? Xiaoxing was silent for a moment before saying, I want to bring my sister to the hospital in Shanghai. She's turning 9 years old this year. It's best if she can finish the surgery before she's 10 years old. I want to bring her for a checkup first and ask how much the surgery costs will be. I have an idea. The transport team can exchange supplies with the black market in the neighboring province. This way, we can earn money faster. Yu Bing patted Xiaoxing's shoulder. Don't worry too much. If you're in trouble, just tell me. I can help. Xiaoxing smiled at Yu Bing. Thank you. Xiaoxing's smile made Yu Bing's heart skip a beat. Even the moonlight seemed to pale in comparison. Fortunately, under the cover of the night, Yu Bing's blush wasn't discovered. Then, if there's nothing else, I'll go back first. Xiaoxing hurriedly grabbed Yu Bing's arm. What's the hurry? Tell Jiang Chun tonight, then we'll split the money tomorrow. Yu Bing nodded in agreement. After Xiaoxing let go, she ran away. After returning home, Yu Bing locked the door. Thinking of Xiaoxing's smile under the moonlight, she couldn't help but blame Xiaoxing for flirting with her. She warned herself, beauty is distracting. You can't be lustful. What beauty? Jiang Chun heard Yu Bing mutter to herself and asked curiously. Yu Bing was startled by Jiang Chun and shouted, You misheard. Then, she thought of today's conversation and pulled Jiang Chun onto the stool. Chun, I have something to tell you. When Jiang Chun saw Yu Bing's careful expression, she was amused. If you have anything to say, just say it. There's no need to hesitate. Yu Bing scratched her head with a smile and said, Xiaoxing and I want to stop our collaboration now, because he and I will become busier and busier from now on and won't be able to take care of that business. Jiang Chun chuckled. I thought it was something serious. I was already prepared. All good things must come to an end. Moreover, you guys have helped me earn so much money, so I'm already very satisfied. Yu Bing looked at Jiang Chun and said seriously, Chun, I'll help you think of another way to earn money during this period of time. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 2:15 Splitting the money. Jiang Chun smiled and shook her head. Just do your own thing. I work in the factory now, so I get a salary and work points every month. This extra income is enough to cover my father's medical fees. Besides, the better our food factory's business, the more dividends we get at the end of the year. That's another sum of money. Although Jiang Chun said this, Yu Bing still felt a little guilty. Previously, when she did not have enough manpower, she called Jiang Chun over to help. Now that she and Xiaoxing had their own businesses, she kicked Jiang Chun to the curb. The next morning, when Qin came to work half an hour early, Yu Bing realized that when Qin seemed much more spirited. Yu Bing believed that with Wen Qin's intelligence, it was impossible for the Sun family to control her anymore. After work at night, everyone gathered at the Xiao family's house. Thinking that it was the last time the three of them would split the money, Yu Bing suggested that everyone eat together. When Xiaoli and Xiaolin heard that Yu Bing was in charge of cooking, they agreed and prepared the ingredients according to Yu Bing's request. Jiang Chun was in charge of cutting the vegetables. Xiaolin marveled as he started the fire. Sister Yu Bing, I haven't eaten your cooking in a long time. After so many months, I can finally eat a delicious meal again. Yu Bing chuckled. You're right, but be careful, or else your brother won't cook for you next time. Xiaoxing glanced at Xiaolin as he washed the vegetables. You're so picky. I'll let you cook your own meal next time. Xiaolin immediately fell silent. After all, he was even worse a cook than his brother. As Xiaoli sat at the side, she listened to everyone's conversation with relish. The moment Yu Bing arrived, the house became very lively. After Yu Bing carried the big yellow clay pot she had brought from home over, she smiled mysteriously and said, I'll cook a new dish for you guys today. Yu Bing's new dish for tonight was rice casserole. After Yu Bing brought the clay pot to the stove, she brushed a layer of oil on the bottom of the pot and placed the rice that had been soaked 2 hours in advance. After smoothing the rice, she placed it in mushroom water. Then, she inserted her finger on the surface of the rice. The water reached half of the first joint of her index finger. Then, after the fire boiled, she lowered it to a small fire and slowly braised it. Then, she cut the sausage into thin slices. She also cut the mushrooms that had been soaked in water and blanched the vegetables in the boiling water. When the rice was 80% cooked, the sausage and mushrooms were placed around the edge of the casserole. A raw egg was beaten in the middle. After the lid of the casserole was closed, a circle of cooking oil was poured along the side of the pot. This way, the rice crust at the bottom of the pot would taste even better. When he heard the sizzling and smelled the aroma, Xiaolin's stomach growled. During this period, Yu Bing began to mix the sauce, the most important part of this dish. She mixed raw soy sauce, oil, white sugar, salt, and sesame oil evenly. Then, she added a suitable amount of water. 5 minutes later, the vegetables were placed, and the sauce was evenly sprinkled. The meal was ready. Then, Yu Bing made braised chicken, fish head tofu soup, scrambled eggs with tomatoes, and salad. As expected, the new dish was praised profusely. Compared to white rice, rice casserole had a richer taste because of the sauce, while the rice crust at the bottom of the pot was brown and crispy. To the inland provinces, the origin of the rice casserole was too far away, so there was no chance of eating it. Therefore, the novelty made this delicacy much more popular to everyone. After dinner, they began to distribute the money. It had been almost half a year since the last time they distributed the money. As usual, Xiaoxing let Yu Bing and Jiang Chun look at the account book first. After they confirmed that there were no mistakes, Xiaoxing received 1,331 yuan this time, while Yu Bing and Jiang Chun each received 998.25 yuan. After Yu Bing and Jiang Chun returned home, Jiang Chun dug out the money they saved up and started counting. Jiang Chun grabbed Yu Bing's hands tightly and asked excitedly, "Guess how much money I have now?" Yu Bing smiled and asked, "How much?" Jiang Chun patted her chest to suppress her urge to shout as she said in a low voice, 1,500 yuan. I've never seen so much money in my life. I even sent 100 yuan back previously. I felt like I had spent a lot on my daily expenses, but there's still so much left. Even if they didn't spend money on expenses, my parents would have to save for a few years to save up 1,500 yuan, but I've already earned so much in just a year. When Yu Bing saw the unconcealed smile on Jiang Chun's face, she shook her head in amusement. I plan to go to the bank to register an account in 2 days. Do you want to come along? Jiang Chun hurriedly nodded. Now, she felt that it was no longer safe to leave the money underground. What if someone could tell at a glance that there were signs of movement on the ground? Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 216 additional order. The order from City Z was delivered once every 3 days, but the timing of City Z's delivery was different from City H's delivery so that the transport truck would have the time to deliver the goods. S City, Huazhong Military District. This bean paste is so tasty. It's very authentic. Indeed, it's much better than the chili sauce we bought in the canteen. This meal is delicious. The soldiers in the army came from all over the world and had all kinds of preferences. There were also many spicy food lovers in the Huazhong Military District. Since he was free today, Zhang Wei didn't ask the orderly to help get food today. He went to the canteen himself, but he didn't expect the complaints he usually heard to become praises today. Hence, after getting food, he also got a small spoonful of bean paste in the ingredients area. Zhang Wei liked bland food. After taking a few bites of the spicy food, he couldn't help but drink some water. However, he still wanted to eat the food. After the meal, a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. However, even so, he, who didn't eat spicy food, couldn't resist the charm of this chili bean paste. Thinking about how his wife also liked spicy food, Zhang Wei called the logistics department to buy 2 cans. The people of the logistics department were amused when they received the call. Mr. Zhang, we only bought a total of 50 bottles. I still have half of them left, but more than 10 people want to buy them. You might as well ask Zhang Li. I have to contact him later to increase the price. Zhang Li? When did this brat's reach extend to this place? All right, I understand. Zhang Wei hung up after figuring things out. When Zhang Wei returned home at night, he happened to see his wife holding a glass bottle with the words red oil bean paste written on it. The red bottle was exactly the same as the one he had eaten from today. Zhang Li brought it home? Lin Shui teased her husband with a smile. You become more observant. These few days, you were able to guess what we wanted before you even came home. When Zhang Li came down from the 2nd floor and saw his brother, he raised his eyebrows proudly. You're back. I heard from the logistics department that you're quite fond of my red oil bean paste. Zhang Wei glared at Zhang Li. Zhang Li was 20 years younger than Zhang Wei, and the entire family doted on him. Because of this, he was a good-for-nothing even at 21 years old. When Zhang Wei was 20 years old back then, he had been in the army for a few years and was already married. However, although Zhang Wei complained, he couldn't bear to force his brother to do something he didn't like. As long as Zhang Li didn't do anything illegal, Zhang Li could do whatever he wanted outside. Ever since Zhang Li was born, their mother hadn't been in good health. She followed their father in the army and could barely take care of their second sister. Therefore, Zhang Wei and Lin Shui brought Zhang Li, who was just a year old, home and raised him with their half-year-old son. Zhang Li's elder brother was like a father, while his elder sister-in-law was like a mother. Zhang Wei and Lin Shui treated their third brother as their son. Zhang Wei doted on him even more than his son. In addition, Zhang Li had been eloquent since he was young and was well-liked by adults. After Zhang Wei took off his hat and coat, he said to Zhang Li, "You're not allowed to interfere in the military's procurement in the future." Zhang Li could successfully get through to the logistics department this time because of the Zhang family's power in the army. However, this was a critical moment for their father's re-election, so Zhang Wei couldn't help but lecture Zhang Li. Zhang Li put on an amiable expression and placed his hand on Zhang Wei's shoulder. "Brother, I'm doing this for the benefit of the spicy food lovers. The logistics department called our house today. They were practically begging me to increase the price. You can't let everyone return to the days of eating boiled vegetables for nothing just to keep a low profile." Zhang Wei thought of the food preferences problem that was mentioned at every meeting and said, "Bean paste is an exception. You're not allowed to interfere in anything else." All right. Zhang Li agreed for the time being. Zhang Li had always been indignant that his family treated him as a mischievous child who had yet to grow up. Therefore, when he saw the red oil bean paste brought by his subordinates, he immediately thought of the problem that his brother had mentioned. The logistics department had never been able to buy the chili sauce the soldiers wanted, so he hurriedly arranged it. He thought that if this matter was settled, he could change his family's impression of him. Unexpectedly, he still didn't get what he wanted. He Mountain Village. Yu Bing was checking the accounts with Wen Qin in the office separated from the warehouse. When she realized that two numbers didn't match, she was annoyed. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 217 Daydream. When Yu Bing heard footsteps and looked up, she saw Xiaoxing walking towards her with a stack of vouchers and a stamped transportation slip. After the two of them exchanged looks, Yu Bing turned to look at Wen Qin. "Wen Qin, go ask the person who handled those two sums and try to find him today. It will be even more difficult to investigate the longer it drags on." Wen Qin nodded and left the office with the receipt. Xiaoxing handed the materials in his hand to Yu Bing and said calmly, "I got an order for bean paste. The supply time is for half a year and 2,000 bottles per month as employee benefits." After hearing about another huge order, Yu Bing looked at Xiaoxing in surprise. "Including the orders you placed previously, with your current order quantity, you're considered a big client of our food factory." Xiaoxing was now in charge of the county's black market, so he was already used to the supply of more than 1,000 bottles a month. However, at this moment, when he saw Yu Bing smiling from ear to ear, he suddenly felt very happy. "This is the receipt. All the procedures have been completed. At that time, I'll get the convoy to take the goods." Xiaoxing's orders were the easiest to fulfill. The purchase receipts and vouchers for transportation when they went to the other provinces to deliver the goods had already been settled. The food factory only had to handle the production. This simple process could help them avoid many risks. Yu Bing thought of something and said, "Now that the business is expanding further, why don't I make you the factory's sales consultant? It'll be similar to a part-time job. This way, your schedule will be flexible and you won't be restricted by the sales department in the factory. You can just contact me directly." Xiaoxing chuckled. "That's a good idea. I came to look for you this time because of this. And they couldn't have a single person manage so many things all alone, or else there would be trouble sooner or later. Previously, it was still a small workshop and everything could be simplified. However, now that the scale had increased, it naturally couldn't be managed the same way as before. This round of recruitment was also the largest recruitment since the first round. A total of 10 people were recruited. Previously, the focus of the food factory was jam and snacks, but chili sauce was considered seasoning, so these two weren't the same type of food. In order to prevent mixing, they couldn't share a production room. After Yu Bing and Wu Jing discussed it, in the empty space behind the current factory building, they made a production room with the same area size as that of the existing factory building. In the middle, they built another door to the disinfection room of the old factory building, so it would be more convenient for the chili sauce to be transported to the disinfection room. The reason why they had such a large-scale renovation this time was that Yu Bing planned to use the factory to produce seasoning and canned meat products. Because the previous development wasn't big, Yu Bing didn't dare to try to produce expensive meat products. However, the timing was right now. Yu Bing planned to do it in advance to prevent wasting time and effort next time. While the recruitment and expansion were going on, the acquisition of chili was also on the agenda. Yu Bing delegated this task to Xiaoxing and Feng Kai. The two of them bought things separately. Not only did it give Feng Kai a chance to gain more experience, but also created an excuse for Xiaoxing to run around, so it was killing two birds with one stone. The Sun family. Sun Nan, are you daydreaming? As long as Yu Bing is still the factory director, do you think you can enter the food factory? You're asking for humiliation. As Li Ping sat in the living room with her legs crossed, she rolled her eyes at Sun Nan, who was reading. When Su Qi, who was sewing the soles of her shoes, heard this, she stopped and whispered to Sun Nan, your father and son you've schemed against her so many times. There's definitely no chance of this happening, so you shouldn't waste time anymore. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Future, I'll have to travel more and more often. Without a good excuse, I'll seem suspicious. After the end of the harvest, the village opened the night school last week. Classes were from 7:30 to 8:40 p.m. from Monday to Friday. There would be a 20-minute break between classes and no classes on the weekend. When the people working in the food factories saw the increase in orders recently, they predicted that the factory would continue to recruit people in advance, so they reminded their family and friends. Therefore, there were quite a lot of people going to night school now. Under such a rich learning environment, the factory welcomed its fourth expansion. After Yu Bing discussed it with the staff in the factory, she decided that after this recruitment, the factory's original management system would be completely adjusted and used as permanent management regulations in the future. The roles of ordinary workers and various administrative personnel had to be divided. 218 Unbelievable. Li Ping burst out laughing when she heard this. Although your mother gave birth to useless people, she's smarter than you. As Madam Sun, who was sitting at the side, watched the women argue, she smoked calmly. As long as there was someone serving her 3 meals a day and she could smoke, these people could do whatever they wanted. When her son came out and she had someone to support her again, she would deal with these unruly women. It was fine if Li Ping said that, but when she saw that her mother was also discouraging her, Sun Nan was so angry that she took a deep breath and said, "Mom, how do you know that it won't work? No matter what, I want to give it a try. If I really can't get chosen, I'll give up and won't think about this anymore." When Li Ping heard this, she continued to make sarcastic remarks. "You're just a good-for-nothing. Do you even remember how to write so many years after graduating from primary school? What are you boasting about?" Although Li Ping felt that Yu Bing wouldn't let Sun Nan apply, it was best to make Sun Nan give up on this idea just in case. If Sun Nan really got lucky and became a factory worker, wouldn't Su Chi be able to use her second daughter to bully her at home? Li Ping couldn't tolerate this, so she spared no effort in mocking Sun Nan to make Sun Nan give up on this idea. Unfortunately, Sun Nan didn't fall for it at all. In the next few days, she attended night school and read and practiced writing whenever she had the time. When Sun Nan successfully passed the selection and joined the food factory, the Sun family was still in disbelief. Yu Bing disdained abusing her power to take revenge for personal grudges. As long as there was nothing wrong with their moral character, she was willing to give capable people the chance. Sun Chi ran into her and Sun Nan's room and looked at her second sister excitedly. "Second sister, did you find an opportunity to take revenge on Yu Bing for getting father arrested?" When Sun Nan heard this, she frowned and asked, "Who said this to you?" Sun Chi replied honestly, "I overheard Aunt talking about it. She said that since you entered the factory, you have a chance to attack Yu Bing." Sun Nan was stunned for a moment. After a moment of silence, she said to Sun Chi solemnly, "Listen, Dad did a lot of wrong things. He helped Sun Yu target the factory director, so he was arrested and sentenced. However, the factory director disregarded the past and gave me a fair chance. If it weren't for the factory director's magnanimity, I might not have been able to enter the factory and become a worker. We have to distinguish right from wrong." Upon hearing this, Sun Chi nodded. She had always been conflicted about this. On the one hand, she felt that if not for Yu Bing, her father wouldn't have been arrested. However, she also knew that Yu Bing couldn't be blamed for this. It wasn't Yu Bing who forced her father to accept bribes, nor was it Yu Bing who forced her cousin, Sun Yu, to set her up. Now that she heard her second sister's words, she understood what she couldn't figure out previously. It was the farming period, so Wu Jin stipulated that every family in the village send out a young and strong laborer. Therefore, in just a week, the brand new factory was constructed. It would be put into use after having putty powder left on for 3 days. The production time of the red oil bean paste was a month. Yu Bing specifically arranged for 2 workers to wash the bean paste that they had bought with warm water in advance before being parched. Yu Bing did the first round personally, then she parched them for another 5 days. They had purchased enough chili for this round. In order to achieve the best taste, after washing it, they still had to dry it for 2 days. The new round of recruitment was already completed, so Yu Bing taught the newcomers how to concoct the red oil chili. At this time, the factory's construction was already completed and there were more than 10 large earth vats placed inside. Yu Bing moved all the materials from the courtyard into the factory. Then, she mixed the red oil chili and bean paste evenly for the second round of condiment mixing. After stirring it evenly, she placed it in a large jar and poured in a suitable amount of oil. Then, she sealed it and marinated it for 20 days before dividing it into small sterilized glass bottles. There were already 33 full-time employees in the factory. Coupled with Xiao Sheng, a part-time employee, the food factory could be considered a small processing plant now. There were two people in the finance department, the accountant, Wen Qin, and the new cashier, Zhou Mi. Zhao Lin, the female director, was in charge of the administrative department, which was mainly in charge of the logistics and personnel assessment of the factory. The position of the director had very few responsibilities, so after Yu Bing and Wu Jing discussed it, they let her hold two positions. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 219 Serious illness. The sales department was changed to the business department, which Feng Kai was in charge of. The sales and procurement of the factory were handled by this department. The last position to be filled was the production director. The factory's leaders unanimously agreed that Jiang Chun would be in charge of following up on the production progress and arranging the production plan for the factory's orders. There were two production rooms in the factory now. Yu Bing called the factory that made jam and snacks Production Room 1, and the newly built factory for condiments and meat products Production Room 2. Because there was only an order for red oil being pasted for Room 2 and no one needed to guard it during the marination period, all the workers in Room 2 were temporarily transferred to Room 1 to help during this period. Among the 10 new employees, 8 belonged to Production Room 1. 3 of them were chefs, and the 5 ordinary workers were part of the mobile team. According to protocol, they had to choose a team leader to manage the team. One of the remaining 2 new employees obtained a cashier post, while the other joined the mobile team of Production Room 1. Yu Bing also changed the employee management system according to the actual situation in the factory to prevent people from slacking off. On first strike, money would be deducted, and on third strike, they would be fired. Among the employees recruited for this round, Su Ling had also applied successfully, so Yu Yin had been in a very bad mood recently, especially since she couldn't schedule her classes either. After that night, their relationship worsened even more. Even if she was willing to put down her pride, Yu Yin knew that it was impossible for her to enter the factory. Seeing how happy Su Ling was in the dormitory all day, Yu Yin felt even more resentful. However, when she thought about how she had gone against her adoptive parents' wishes in order to come to the village and even swore that she didn't need their help, Yu Yin knew that it was useless even if she gave in now. Yu Yin knew her adoptive mother's personality very well. She hated spineless people the most. If she really went back on her word and said that she couldn't stand the hardship and wanted to go back, her adoptive mother wouldn't help her. It was because she wasn't her biological daughter, so her adoptive mother didn't care about her. The more Yu Yin thought about it, the angrier she became. Her biological parents didn't have connections, but her adoptive parents did. However, her adoptive parents wouldn't help her. At the thought of this, Yu Yin hurriedly took out a letter and prepared to write to Duan Mei. Ever since they parted last time, the two of them had only sent each other a letter once. The last time her sister sent a letter, she mentioned that the jam was delicious. Yu Yin planned to buy 6 bottles from the factory when she sent the letter this time. Although the factory didn't sell the jam to individuals, they would still give special treatment to the people in their own village. As usual, she asked about her family's health and work situation first. This was because Yu Yin was completely unaware of her biological parents' situation. She yearned for Duan Mei and her sister to write more about her family's matters in the letter. Yu Yin also mentioned her own recent developments. She felt that this way, she would become closer to her family. At the end of the letter, she suggested going back to visit her family. After writing this letter, she continued to write another one. This was for her adoptive parents. She couldn't visit her biological family empty-handed, so she had to get more money from her adoptive parents first. After Yu Yin thought about it for a long time, she decided to ask for money on the grounds that she was seriously ill. She did have a high fever of 41 degrees last time. If Yang Yin had not discovered her in time, there was no telling what might have happened. At the thought of this, Yu Yin was extremely determined. After writing the letter, Yu Yin couldn't help but smile at the thought of returning to her true home and seeing her family, whom she had not seen for many years. Her originally depressed mood also improved. Since Yu Bing didn't know how lucky she was, she couldn't blame her for snatching her parents back. A week later, Yu Yan's adoptive parents, Yu Hai and Li Xian, received the letter. When they saw that Yu Yin was seriously ill, the two of them became as anxious as cats on a hot tin roof. One packed their luggage, while the other went to apply for leave and buy train tickets. On the other side, the Yu family also received Yu Yan's letter and the jam she had specifically bought. Because Yu Yin had sent a lot of jam, Yu Pan could finally dig a full spoonful openly this time. After adding water to it, she sat on the sofa with Yu Wu and drank it slowly. Our second sister is not bad. She's much more generous than Yu Bing. Duan Mei looked at the jam that was missing a spoonful with heartache. Let me tell you, you can only dig a full spoonful this time. We have to save the rest. Your cousin's birthday is next month, so we have to take 2 bottles to your uncle's house. Yu Pan complained indignantly, why should I save it? If I wasn't smart enough to mention it at the end of the letter, these 6 bottles of jam wouldn't have been sent over. All you do is send our things to our uncle's house. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 220 Their own thoughts. When Duan Mei heard this, she glared at Yupan. Then, she hurriedly looked at Mr. Yu as she explained guiltily, if I bring jam to them, they'll think that our family is doing well. Wouldn't this give our Yu family pride? I don't want to be inferior to my sister and let those gossipy women say that you're inferior to my brother-in-law. Only then did Mr. Yu relent. Yupan secretly rolled her eyes. It had been quite a while since her mother had been subsidizing her maiden family behind her father's back. However, she didn't want to be the bad guy who revealed it. She was going to marry out of the family anyway, so if she offended her mother, her dowry might get deducted. Yupan continued to read the letter. I caught a cold recently and had a fever that reached 41 degrees. When I was delirious, I thought I would never see you guys again in my life. Fortunately, I was discovered in time and sent to the infirmary for treatment. Don't worry. I've already recovered. Dad, Mom, I want to see you guys and my siblings. I'm afraid I won't have the chance to see what my family looks like. Sincerely yours, Yu Yin. When the family of 4 sitting in the living room heard Yu Yin say that she had recovered, they automatically chose to skip the first half and discuss the second half. Yu Bing's fever had reached 42 degrees once, but Duan Mei and Mr. Yu ignored her after feeding her 2 tablets of fever-reducing medicine. Didn't Yu Bing survive? Yu Wu was quite curious about what his second sister looked like. After all, he had already eaten what she had bought before he even saw her. Dad, Mom, if she wants to come, let her come. Duan Mei said in frustration, how can it be that easy? Yan Yin's mother was the one who helped find the adopter. If they find out that we've been secretly interacting with Yu Yin, what will happen to me and your father's reputation in the factory? Yupan had a good impression of Yu Yin. After all, Yupan had only mentioned it casually, but she didn't expect Yu Yin to be so considerate. From this, Yupan could tell that the family who adopted Yu Yin was very well off. She couldn't help but think of ways to extract more benefits. Yupan was 23 years old this year. If nothing unexpected happened between her and her current boyfriend, she would probably meet his parents at the end of the year and start discussing marriage. The more Yupan thought about it, the more she felt that having a rich sister help gather dowry for her was a good idea. Therefore, she had to meet Yu Yin more often and build a good relationship with her. Dad, Mom, I agree to let Yu Yin come and reunite our family. There's a small chance of her bumping into Auntie Shi and Uncle Yao. Duan Mei and her husband exchanged looks. They were also conflicted. Their second daughter was well off, so it would definitely be beneficial for them to build a good relationship with her, but Yupan knew that if she didn't dispel her parents' worries, they would definitely reject Yu Yin. Hence, she began to think about a plan. At bedtime, she really thought of a way. She ran into her parents' room and said excitedly, Dad, Mom, I've thought of a way. On the 3rd day after receiving the letter, Yu Hai and Li Xian arrived at the Fengtu mountain commune with their luggage. Because it wasn't their day off, there was no ox cart to pick them up. The couple could only ask for directions along the way. Yu Hai looked at his wife, who was panting with every step, and said worriedly, Li Xian, give me the things in your hand. You're frail to begin with, so why did you bring so many things? Li Xian could only hand the food in her hand to her husband. Then, she shook her head and said with a smile, back then, I went to the battlefield too. If I hadn't injured my body and got transferred to the logistics department, I would still be able to fight enemies now. Yu Hai smiled helplessly and said, you're too headstrong. If you had a softer personality, Yu Yin wouldn't be so afraid of you. Li Xian smiled and rolled her eyes at her husband. It's fine as long as we have a benevolent father like you at home. If I hadn't been stricter, would you have been able to tame our boy? Only after he grew older did he finally begin to mature. Yu Yin is a girl. I'm already very lax with her. Yu Hai looked at his wife dotingly as he said, yes, yes, yes. You've indeed shown your gentlest side to Yu Yin. It's also because Yu Yin is stubborn and in some aspects, she's even more difficult to deal with than her brother. When Li Xian heard this, she felt a little proud and couldn't help but retort, so what if Yu Yin is stubborn? I'm stubborn too. I raised her after all, so she's like me. As the couple chatted with laughter as they walked, they no longer felt that the journey was long and boring. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.